And hi, today I'm going to do a bookshelf tour. As you know, on my channel I do reviews of literature and history and also art books, and I go to art museums. So I have lots of art books in my library, and this is one of my shelves. This one is dedicated just to art books, and I'm going to go through just this top shelf here. This is 3 shelves. So let's begin. The first book here we have is of Edouard Vuillard, and this is a exhibition book, introduction by John Russell by the American Federation of Arts, and it has a lot of prints and drawings by Vuillard. He was a Nabi painter. He's a contemporary of Bonnard, and so these are some nice things to look at. Some of these are really free-forming, just wonderful, relaxed drawings. Look at this woman here on a chair. Here's a nice spontaneous portrait of a woman. It's called Attentive Face. So I like that one. The next one is Confessions of an Art Addict by Peggy Guggenheim. If you've ever been to Venice, there's a Peggy Guggenheim Museum in Venice, an excellent museum. She lived an amazing life. Of course, she's related to the Guggenheims and the Guggenheim Museum in New York City. But she was associated with the Surrealists, and she lived in Venice, and she bought a lot of paintings, and then she came to New York, and she was associated with Jackson Pollock, and she was married to Max Ernst. So she has a very interesting life, and this is a wonderful autobiography. Here's The Art Spirit. When I was at art school, one of the teachers recommended this book, and it's really a great book. If you think you might be interested in art, in making art, and then you're kind of unsure yourself. I read this book and I go, wow, I see the world like this guy sees the world. So I felt that I had found my tribe when I read this book and associated so strongly with the way he saw the world, how artists see the world. And it's a unique book. And it's not real structured. It's just kind of, he's just kind of like talking in an he's just speaking. It's like he's just speaking in a extemporaneous manner. So I recommend this one by Robert Henry he's from New York, of course. This one is the Blue Octavo Notebooks. This is Kafka, so this is on the wrong shelf. But this is just some notebooks they found of Kafka, and it's just a lot of random little things. I enjoyed it. I like these kind of little collectibles that are random about an author, but this is anyway, I recommend this. The next one is 7 Dada Manifestos and Lampisteries by Tristan Tzara. He was a Dadaist, and he's more of a writer Dadaist. I kept seeing his name in other books and seeing photographs of him, and so I wanted to learn about who he was. So I bought this. I saw this in a store and bought it. And he's a very eccentric, obtuse guy. He just says all these non sequiturs. You can't make anything from his writing. He's just a nutcase. But I found out who he is, so I'm glad I have this. This one is The Life of James McNeill Whistler. This is written by Pennell, and I have a video on my channel. I thoroughly read this book very closely, and I made a video so you can see more about this on my channel. I am interested in the other book that's associated with this called The Gentle Art of Making Enemies by Whistler. So I want to read that, but this is a good biography. This one is Berthe Morisset. She was a painter. She was in the Impressionists. She shows up at the Salon. She married Edouard Manet's brother, Eugene Manet. She had a daughter named Julie Manet. She died fairly early in life, and these are her letters. These are very interesting. The only disappointing thing is that she had a close relationship with Manet, and and he painted her. Some of his best paintings are of Berthe Morisot, and the family destroyed the correspondence between her and Manet. That's just so sad that we don't have an opportunity to see their correspondence. This one is a biography of an American artist by Townsend Ludington, and it's Marsden Hartley. I like Marsden Hartley. It's a very unique style. He does landscapes, he does portraits, kind of all kinds of things. One of the things I liked about this biography is it's just kind of a very like homespun biography. It's very natural, and it's not such a corporate biography or a high publishing house biography. It's a very readable and personal, relationship that the author has with the painter. And so I like this style of biography. One of the things I liked about Marsden Hartley is that I remember that when he met Gertrude Stein, who was living in Paris, he showed her his work, and she said something to the effect of, "Oh, finally an American artist who has his own personality." And so I really, that's a wonderful compliment to him as an artist, to have your own personality and to do it strongly. And so I recommend you look at his art. This is Vermeer's Camera, Unveiling the Truth Behind the Masterpieces, and by Philip Stedman. And this goes with the theme that artists like Vermeer were using optical devices to set up their paintings and guide them through their paintings. And this is a very academic book, so I didn't really read it too closely. When I see these academic books, I kind of get repelled by them, but I do like the theme and the subject, and but I think I kind of gave up on this one. But it has a lot of pictures in it and scientific comparisons. There's a great documentary about this subject that you should look for. This is by the author Camille Piglia, and this is her book on art called Glittering Images. I've kind of followed her career, and she goes through particular works of art and does short paragraphs on them, and so get an idea how she sees art. This one is this is a biography by Dora Ashton of Noguchi, and it's called East and West. You know what? I haven't read this one. I've had this for a while. Dora Ashton, though, is an author I like. She wrote about American artists from New York, and I got to get to this one. I'm kind of the truth is I'm kind of indifferent to his art. I respect him, and I think he's a good artist, but I don't have enough enthusiasm to read this, but I hope to get to it. One thing I want to say is that when I talk about art, I made a promise to myself that I wasn't just going to gush over every artist, and every artist is great, and every artist is wonderful, and you've got to see this. I want to have a full range of opinions on artists. Some artists I love, some artists I like, some artists I'm indifferent to, some artists I kind of repel me, some artists I hate. I think that art needs to have a full range of descriptors for the art and how you feel, and people should talk about that. I really feel that one of the problems with art is that people have been cowed and are afraid to have their opinions, and I do think it's healthy for the art dialogue if people are honest about what they think. The next one is Dora Carrington. This is the art of Dora Carrington, and she was British, I bought this, and here's some of her work. I don't think I've read this one yet. I am interested in her, and I'll get to this one. This one is Ambrose Vollard. He was the art dealer in Paris. He was associated with the Impressionists, with Van Gogh, with Gauguin, and then later with Picasso. And he also made prints. So this is a book about all of his prints. So it's mainly a visual book about these. And I also have another book that he wrote some books. He wrote some books. He wrote a book on Degas. He wrote something called Recollections of an Art Dealer. So I was interested in him there was a period of time when I was very interested in him. This is Picasso and Dora, and this is by James Lord. And this is a really enjoyable book. It's just about his friendship. He was really friends with Dora Maar. She's a photographer, and she went out with Picasso. And it's a very kind of a more intimate type of biography because he knew her. So he did, some biographers don't know their subject, some of them do, and he does a very good job. And there's a lot of good conversations and intimate things about them together. I read another biography of her that's kind of interesting because the author ended up not liking her. She was like, I'm going to write about Dora Maar, and then she started finding more and more about her, and then by the end she was like, I don't even like this woman. But anyway, this is good. I like this. But James Lord is much more of a charming man, and tried to make her look as good as he could. In a charming way. I don't know how to say it, but the next one is Edie, an American Biography by Gene Stein. This is about Edie Sedgwick. She was part of Andy Warhol's group, and she went out with Bob Dylan. It's a wonderful story of what happened to her, and so I like this book. I'm very interested in her, and she kind of has a cult following. She's in his films. She's in Andy Warhol films, and a lot of the photographs, and she's a very photogenic person. This one is Night Studio, Memoir of Philip Guston by Musa Mayer. I like Philip Guston. I went through a period where I was very interested in him, and you know what? I have not read this. I've only read parts of this. I've just opened this and kind of scanned it. I need to read the whole thing in a serious way. This one is a biography of Edward Hopper by Gail Levin. I went through a period where I was very fascinated with Edward Hopper. I have several other books with his work in it, and I was very anxious to read her biography. I liked it at the beginning. Then she goes into his wife, Jo Hopper, had some diaries, and she said he gets into a lot of the opinions by his wife about him that were made him to be kind of a monster. And I was felt there were a lot of cheap shots, because couples have their squabbles, and we never heard his side of it. We only heard her side of it. So this was I don't even think I finished this because I got upset reading it. Okay, this one is by Gordon Onslow Ford. It's a painter I like. It's called Creation. Gordon Onslow Ford. Gordon Onslow Ford was born in England, and he joined the military. I think it was the Navy, and he was an up and coming on the road to become an officer, and he realized he liked art, and so then he just dropped. He had this great future in the Navy, and then he became an artist, and he went to Paris and met André Breton, and then around 1939 a lot of the surrealists migrated to New York City, and he went with them, and he gave a speech to many of the New York painters like Jackson Pollock about surrealism, and he kind of injected the whole surrealist spirit into New York City artists because he spoke English, and André Breton didn't speak English, so he was but then he left there, and then he lived in Mexico, and then he lived in Northern California. Anyway, he wrote this book. And it's interesting because it doesn't have a regular typeset. He hand wrote the book. And so it's a little more difficult to read, but it is very readable, and I like this book. He has a very good spirit. He's a very spirited man, and that's a very important part of his work. Here's a smaller book I bought for a show he did with more. He talks about the world. He has a theory of his art where there are certain symbols that mean something to him, and he kind of rearrange in this latter part of his career, and he rearranges these symbols on his media, and they're like the swirl and the circle and the dot and the line, and so all these things are part of his internal language. So here's another one, Painting in the Instant by Gordon Onslow Ford, and so he does his symbols. So these are a little more difficult to find, but I recommend them, and I want to read them again. I read them, and immediately after I finished, I wanted to read them again. These are 194 drawings by Giorgio de Chirico. If you know my channel, you know I have some long videos on Giorgio de Chirico, and these are some of his drawings. Very nice drawings. Just a wonderful little book that was put together by Abrams, and This is a great one to have in your library. This one is the journal of Eugene Delacroix, and I went through a period where I really liked Delacroix, and when I found this, I was so excited to read it, but I had a really hard time following it. And I kind of blamed myself for a while. And then as I read more books, I started to think just recently that the problem is the translation. It's translated by Walter Pack, who was an American. And but this is hard to read. It's hard to make sense of what's going on here. So I really hope someone would come out with a new translation of this book, because I was unsatisfied with this, and I was so excited about the subject and what Delacroix was going to write about. And that brings me to another subject. It's like one of the types of books I like visual arts, but when I see a book that's written by an artist, how an artist writes his letters or his memoir or his autobiography, I always try to pick it up, because I like to know how they deal with words, and they write different than authors. Next one here is Life with Picasso by Francois Gillot. Life with Picasso, and she was married to Picasso, and there was a time before 1995 where there really wasn't much books out there about what Picasso's personality was. And so Picasso tried to stop publication of this, but this was very controversial, and it's a very good book from her viewpoint, and I recommend this book. Now there's lots of books on Picasso and what he was like, but there was a time when it was rare to find anything about him. This is A Day with Picasso, and these are photographs that Jean Cocteau had a camera, and he knew Picasso. These are photographs taken like 1915 of Picasso and Max Jacob and Modigliani when they were just walking around Paris. You see this one published a lot, this one here. And so this is just a really fun book of photography by Jean Cocteau. This one is Touching Time and Space, Portrait of David Ireland. He's a San Francisco artist, more of a conceptual artist. And I like some of his work. This was an interesting book. I'm kind of indifferent to him. But anyway, I'm glad I read this. This is a biography of Man Ray by Roland Penrose. Man Ray, the sculptor and painter and photographer, It's kind of an interesting story. Man Ray, when he was in Paris, he went out with Lee Miller, who was the photographer, and then she left Man Ray for an Arab, and then she lived, I think, in Algiers, and then she left him for Roland Penrose. Roland Penrose was a British artist, and so then they lived together in Britain, but then Roland Penrose wrote a biography of Man Ray. So the surrealists really, it kind of shows you the surrealist mindset. Roland Penrose also wrote a biography of Picasso. This is Francis Bacon. This is a biography of Francis Bacon by Michael Pepiot. And I have to be honest, for the work of Francis Bacon repulses me. I think it's kind of disgusting and gross, but I know he's highly rated, and so I read this biography, made the effort, and I still don't like him, but I'm going to say that. If you read anybody from Britain, they just go nuts about him. This is a biography of William Glackens and the Eight, the artist who freed America. He's from the Ashcan School. This is written by Ira Glackens. I have not read this book. I'm kind of indifferent to his art. I do want to read this book. I think the Ashcan School is a little oversold, but I am interested in them at the same time. This is a book, this is a biography of Paul Renner, the typographer. He invented many fonts, including the famous Futura font, which is widely used in corporate America. I have a video on this book. I went into great detail book review of this book, so look at my channel for that. This one is Balthus. I like Balthus a lot. Some of his paintings are just wonderful. You know, I know there are some criticisms of him, and sometimes I do take I kind of find that I'm inconsistent. Sometimes I take a real moral stance on an artist, and with him somehow I am charmed by his work, and I like his work. This one is Sangajai, the Zen of Ink and Paper by D.T. Suzuki. These are some ink drawings and writings, and D.T. Suzuki was a author who wrote about Zen Buddhism, and so I like ink drawings. This is Subversion of Images by Paul Nouget, and these are some photographs. He was a contemporary of Magritte. And I got that. That's from Wakefield Press. This one is Henri Rousseau. There was a time when I was just absolutely fascinated with Rousseau. I still like him, but I went through this book so many times. It's from the Museum of Modern Art, and I really like Rousseau. Henri Rousseau, one of my favorite artists. This one is René Magritte Selected Writings. Once again, I like books that are written by artists. These are all different subjects that he wrote about, and I read a biography of Magritte. It's on my channel, and I talked about this book, so I like this book. This is Odilon Redon, To Myself, Notes on Life and Art. And I like this. I haven't read this book. I like Redon. I'm kind of indifferent to him, but I want to read this. This is Paul Gauguin Letters. And I did a video on Paul Gauguin books. And I had another copy of Paul Gauguin Letters. And then I saw this, and I did not put this in my video. But anyway, I think I have a duplicate of this book. Paul Gauguin Letters. Good book. This is Paris in Winter by David Coggins, and this is an American painter. He works kind of in washes. I'm not sure if they're watercolor or ink or gouache, but anyway, he goes to Paris in the winter and then he paints people. And he has a great Instagram. He has a great Instagram page, so this is an interesting book. This is Georges Rouault's Misery. Georges Rouault was a painter. He went to art school with Henri Matisse, and he's Christian, and he does a lot of Christian imagery, but he has a very unique style. He's a pretty dark painter, you know, and here's some examples of his work. And these are just kind of descriptions of them. I like his work. This is Art as Art, Selected Writings of Ad Reinhardt. And Ad Reinhardt is just a nutty guy. He's around the New York School. I can't even describe him. He did all black paintings. He's just hard to describe. He's a very unusual artist. And if you get around to it, if you go through all the famous people, you'll finally get around to Ad Reinhardt and you read this book. This is Marc Chagall, My Life. I'm kind of indifferent to Marc Chagall. I haven't read this one. Actually, he kind of a little bit. I don't really get him, but I recognize that he's highly rated. This is Dor Ashton, Documents of 20th Century Art, Picasso on Art. And so, like I said, before 1995, there wasn't much about Picasso, but this was around. And she collected a lot of statements by Picasso from interviews and publications, and she put them all together. And this was really a great book about Picasso, in his words. Then we have, this one is Marguerite Torchis, or Letters Between Friends. I have not read this. Letters Between the Two. It looks kind of academic. Anyway, I have it. And here's a small book about Daumier, the cartoonist. Around the time of Delacroix, he did some great things that were in the newspaper, and he's one of my favorite artists. Here's a small book, Utrillo, Little Library of Art. You used to see these in bookstores. They were small books with color images of famous artists, and they're kind of cute. Then, just kind of an example of old publishing and the way people used to look at art. This is a Methion. This is a famous publishing house, I believe. Anyway, so that's my first row here, and thanks for watching.